We didn't just have the major set of changes for Mythic Plus and how Mythic Plus is going to work in the War Within, we also got in this new reset, in this new week of the beta of the War Within, more balance tuning to many specs and also their hero talents. So let's go over how many of these changes. This time most of them are positive actually. We're getting, generally speaking, mostly buffs. So for the first 3 classes, Death Knight, Druid and Demon Hunter, the only 2 changes are very numerical and they are just to Frost and Balance. Frost DK gets a whole bunch of numbers increased and Balance Druid also gets a whole bunch of numbers increased. So we're not talking about anything technical, we're not talking about new talents or talents moved around the talent tree or maybe changes to the hero talents, just flat out buffs to their numbers, to their abilities. Now the changes on the other hand to Hunter are on the opposite spectrum because they are mostly changes to talents. So the generic Hunter gets the removal of Steel Trap and Death Chakram. Steel Trap was a rather useless trap, so that's a good one. Death Chakram, the explanation is to remove the button bloat of Hunters, which is somewhat understandable, especially for BM, given the amount of clickable CD buttons they were starting to get after their rework. This might be more understandable. The real positive change though for Hunter is an extra AoE CC, much more usable than Explosive Trap in Mythic Plus. Because now Explosive Trap has a dual choice node with the new trap, Implosive Trap, which now blows up and instead of knocking enemies to Africa, it knocks them up. So it's the same option that Shamans have with Thunderstorm, not knocking enemies back, but rather knocking them up. That's the same for Implosive Trap for Hunter. Although, to be fair, it does have a 90-second cooldown, so it's quite a lengthy cooldown as a CC, but still, having an extra AoE CC for Hunter is quite good. For BM, nothing really is changing. One thing is changing for marksmanship, and that's a nerf. We touched on marksmanship AoE damage in Mythic Plus a couple of days ago, and how much more damage were they doing with multi-shot. Now multi-shot is nerfed. Now Small Game Hunter increases multi-shot's damage by 75% instead of 100, and now the focus of multi-shot is up to 30 instead of 20. Kind of necessary given the current state of the AoE damage of marksmanship in the beta. Survival gets quite some large changes to their, not their playstyle, but many of their buttons. First, Sikhem is inverted. Previously, it used to have kill shot crits, resetting the cooldown of kill command. Now instead is kill command having a chance to reset the cooldown of kill shots. Coordinated assault is made much more straightforward and simple. Now you use it, you do a bunch of damage, and then you and your pet do 20% more damage for 20 seconds, plus an extra chance to reset kill command's cooldown. So it's much more simple compared to all of the extra minor effects it had before. Also, more simple change to Flanking Strike. Now it's not a button, you don't click it, it's passive. Every 3 kill commands, your 4th one turns into Flanking Strike. So it's a more passive baked in your effects rather than being an extra cooldown. And then Blizzard continues down the road of attempting for a more smoother rotation on survival and also less button spam on Mungus Bite on single target, as well as fewer amounts of wildfire bombs available. This is now the 15th round of nerfs to the cooldown and the availability of wildfire bomb for survival. So Mungus Bite now has fewer stacks, it's 3 instead of 5, with a shorter duration, while Wildfire Infusion has a lower chance to be reset by kill command, as well as Wildfire Bomb's cooldown reduction, further reduced now down to half a second instead of 1, which used to be 2. Again, multiple nerfs to the availability. How often can you get to press Wildfire Bomb as a survival hunter? We do then have nerfs to Sun Fury, but it's only Sun Fury Fire version. Considering Arcane Mages weren't even playing that much with Sun Fury, this makes sense. Sun Fury is nerfed in the Spellfire Sphere spell damage bonus for fire. Burden of Power's Pyroblast damage bonus is also reduced for fire, and Memory of Alar's Hyperthermia now has a shorter duration for fire. So again, It's another nerf to Sun Fury, but it's still only just for Fire, not for Arcane. However, Fire still gets nerfed, because on top of the previous round of nerfs of last week, Fire gets another round of nerfs to many of their chances to procs and effects, so not to their base abilities like the last nerf, but now Pyromaniac has a lower proc chance, and then when Pyromaniac procs, the damage echo, the damage duplication of Pyro and Flame Strike is only at 50% effectiveness instead of 100. Molten Fury has a lower bonus damage. Ashen Feather gets cut in half in its bonus damage. Phoenix Reborn also gets cut in half in its bonus damage. So it's a whole series of nerfs to these effects for Fire, while though applying quite a lot of buffs and improvements to the right side of the tree. So everything centering around Living Bomb, practically. Living Bomb, Lit Fuse, Blast Zone, Explosivo, Explosive Ingenuity, Sparkling Cinders, all of these are getting buffed. Now Living Bomb can apply Ignite, now Living Bomb does 50% more damage inside of Combustion, even higher chance to proc Lit Fuse inside of Combustion. It's just an attempt to get Fire Mages to play more around the right side of the tree, even in AoE. Since nowadays Mages in AoE still just continue their single target rotation, build up a massive Ignite on one target with Pyroblasts and keep spreading that Ignite to other targets as a way to AoE, Blizzard is attempting to give Fire Mages another way to do AoE damage right now with these set of talent changes down the right side of their tree. Arcane Mage also, this time unlike Fire, actually gets some positive overall changes. One of the cooler effects for these changes of Arcane is that number one, Arcane Orb is now baseline. Arcane Blast gets 10% more base damage. Clear Casting now utilizes Bad Luck Protection instead of being truly random like it currently is in-game. You have peak AoE playstyle for Arcane with the new talent Static Cloud. Each time you cast Arcane Explosion, your Arcane Explosion does 25% more damage, stacking up to 100%. So you better spam that button in AoE as Arcane. In general, though, it is another positive round of changes compared to also what already was given to Arcane. What perhaps is more surprising is Frost Mage, that continues to be mostly left by the wayside. They got a 12% Ice Lance damage increase as their more meaningful change in this round of tuning. Who gets pretty much also passed over this time around is Monk, completely pretty much, as well as Priest. Where we do have the big changes are for Paladin. First, it's an okay change, is to Lightsmith, the least played with hero talent in the beta right now, gets massive buffs because, well, it wasn't being played because it was weak. So Sacred Weapon damage and healing is heavily increased, doubled the damage and healing of Divine Guidance, increased the Blessing of the Forge, echo replicated values of your abilities minus Light of Dawn, and then Hammer and Anvil damage and healing is also increased by 50%. So a whole set of practically increases to try to make this hero talent more appealing to Paladins, which at the moment it is not. Where we are actually talking about the good stuff is Holy Paladin. Historic change since the days of BFA, Holy Paladin gets Glimmer of Light and its follow-up cooldown created specifically for Glimmer, Daybreak. They are now gone. They have now been removed. So obviously, as a result, a lot of talents in their tree have to be reworked because, of course, they were working with Glimmer. For example, you have Glistening Radiance, which used to give your Holy Power spenders a chance to trigger the Glimmer healing or damage. Now this is changed to spending Holy Power, having a chance to trigger the Saved by the Light Absorb Shield at 30% effectiveness. This is amongst the more mediocre of the changes. The positive ones are that the Rising Sunlight now gives you still your free extra cast Holy Shocks, but now rather than being tied to Daybreak, they are tied to Avenging Wrath and Divine Toll. Previously you were getting 6 additional free Holy Shocks, now you're getting 8 additional free Holy Shocks. Overflowing Light created an Absorb Shield up to 15% of your max HP based on the Glimmer of Light overhealing. Now it's based on your Holy Shock's overhealing, but the max HP shield is down to 10%, even though this should be easier to achieve with the new Holy Shock. Glorious Dawn has been nerfed. Previously, Holy Shock had a 10% chance to refund a charge, plus 1% per Glimmer. So this could go up to almost 20%. But now, though, the change leaves it at 12% flat. And now, of course, you don't get 10% more Glimmer healing or damage, you get 10% more Holy Shock healing. What Holy Paladin also gets, though, is new talents. Word of Glory and Light of Dawn gain up to 30% additional chance to crit, based on the target's HP. You also get Word of Glory and Light of Dawn having a chance equal to your haste, to reduce the mana cost of your next Holy Light, Crusader Strike or Judgment. You have Truth Prevails, which makes Judgment heal you and have its mana cost reduced by 30%, and 50% of the overhealing of this effect is transferred to two nearby allies. And then, of course, you have the basic effect, which is that Holy Shock base healing and damage has been increased significantly compared to live. Because, of course, you are losing the extra value of Glimmer, so you are now going back to bake more power into the actual ability, rather than having to make Holy Shock hit like a wet noodle, because it has so many extra effects attached to it. So removing Glimmer gives you the option to now gain way more power to your actual ability. And this is overall, for now at least, a much improved version of Holy Paladin. We are steadily moving towards finally making your Holy Power abilities powerful again, even though for now it's mostly thanks to one of the hero talents, changing your Word of Glory. Holy Shock now heals a lot. Holy Light has become a massive single target heal abilities. Flash of Light also has been buffed as well and heals more compared to before. So basically now you feel like a chunkier healer. You feel like a more thick healer compared to before, with these changes given to Holy Paladin. Now, when it comes to the changes of Rogue, it's a bit harder to talk about because Deathstalker has been changed quite a bit, but Deathstalker was a broken hero talent that nobody was playing in the beta, so it's kind of hard to determine how they work, even given the ridiculous amount of bugs currently live for the Rogue hero talents in the War Within beta. It is still a very weird hero talent. You know, Deathstalker's mark, ever since in the beta of the War Within, rogues lose Shadow Dance in their general hero talent 3, having your main effect of your hero talent tied to ambushing from stealth. If you are a rogue, for example, that doesn't have Shadow Dance, doesn't have free ways to get into stealth other than Vanish, and you are also not an outlaw rogue that can reduce the cooldown of Vanish, it's pretty weird to have the power attached to coming from stealth, because obviously this will have much more value in Mythic Plus and a much reduced value in the raid. The only cool thing of these changes for Assassination is that you get this new Fatal Intent talent, which works like the BFA's Eternal Palace tier Inkpod trinket. So you build up a bunch of stacks of this trinket on the target, and when the target reaches execute range, these stacks blow up for massive damage. This is possibly good because the damage is plague damage, which is nature damage, and Assassination has 4 different ways to increase your nature damage on the target, from your mastery to Zoldix to your own Shiv effect, so it could be a quite cool effect, even though still the hero talent itself looks pretty weird. What looks even weirder is the other changes given to Fatebound, the Assassination Outlaw combo of hero talent. I'm still way too confused by these changes. The head's side of Fatebound gets nerfed for some reason. Tails gets more base damage and less power on lucky RNG streaks, which I guess it's a good quality of life change, but overall it still feels like a very weird hero talent, and even the effects feel still super weird. Lucky Coin now, instead of giving you 1% of all of your stats, it gives you 7% agility, but now you no longer have this unlimited stackable effect throughout the fight. Now it only lasts for 15 seconds. It just feels like such a poor and cheap hero talent, unfortunately, for rogues, which continue to be quite on the downtrend in this beta as far as their power goes. Funnily enough, talking about power, the biggest of the power increases is left for last because both Arms and Fury receive flat out 30% all ability damage increase. And also Arms gets overpower damage increased by 20%. On top of this bonus addition, we're also adding 4 extra buffs. All 3 rogue specs plus elemental shaman are all getting some blanket buffs. 15% more damage for assassination and then 20% for outlaw and subtlety, but also 30% more damage to elemental, even with the rework or changes coming to shaman in the next reset of the beta. We have these sweeping changes, which, as you can see from the overall damage done, for example, in the testing before these changes happened, you have pretty much, all 3 rogue specs, the 2 warrior specs, elemental shaman as well. They weren't doing exactly too good. They were all mostly towards the bottom half for the majority of the bosses, so sensible set of changes, even though it's just numbers tuning, so it's not that relevant when it comes to looking at how things work in the beta. These have been the collection of the changes right now in the beta, from the very strict and short you get buffed in all of your damage of the warriors, to the large talent updates of Holy Paladin, many also damage increases to balance and to frost decay being more underperforming in the beta, continued nerfs to Fire Mage, plus an attempt to make their right side Living Bomb AoE of the talent tree to be more playable, continued positive changes for Arcane Mage, as well as continued changes to Hunter, this time more focus given to survival, whereas the multi-shot AoE power of marksmanship gets nerfed. These have been all of the collection of the changes given in this latest round of tuning in the War Within beta so far. Of course, this will continue to happen week by week, so we will be able to continue to monitor the changes given to each of the specs, but for today, on this Thursday, it is now time to leave each other. We are saying our goodbyes, of course, by thanking everyone who is supporting, not just by watching the video itself, but also by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, for today I kept the background nature animal sounds ASMR type of feel.